won't have to hear the same material twice. Yay. Good. Okay, so as Lisa said, I used to work for the Iowa legislature, and what I did for them was write legislation. And I got to work with everybody, the general public, the sane ones and the crazy ones. I got to work with Republicans and Democrats. I got to work with Democrats. I had to work with Republicans. I worked with the governor's office. I worked with the attorney general's office. I worked with the Department of Education, the Department of Labor. I worked with everybody. I worked with labor unions.
Is that good or bad?
Good.
Can you see if I make faces at you?
No.
No.
Okay, so it was a real learning opportunity, and I got to see in an ideal environment when lobbying really worked. And I can tell you that when you are a squeaky wheel and you are a citizen and you are a constituent, it really works to bother your elected officials, because not many of you do. So if you take it upon yourself to learn more about your state government, especially local government, and you become invested in it, and you pay attention, and maybe even get the itch and run yourself, you really can make a difference. And that's what this is about. And with the news that New Jersey is going to step it up and do something with this coalition, I urge you to do exactly that. You can make a difference, and the more they hear from the non-theistic community, the more they will believe that you have the numbers and that you have the influence to be a constituency they need to pay attention to, because you will have influence when it comes to them being reelected or not, and to their campaign coffers. So, what is lobbying? This is real basic. I'm going to break everything down and we're going to talk about how to do it, because I don't think that our system, our education system, and certainly not the news media or the elected officials themselves do a very good job of teaching us how to do this. Lobbying is simply the act of influencing decisions made by officials of government, most often legislators or city council, members of government, and also regulatory agencies. It's also advocating. It's to speak or write in favor, urge, publicly recommend. Letters to the editor, for example, are advocating. It's also lobbying. And most importantly, and something that doesn't get really spoken about, it's educating. You get to educate your elected officials, who by and large do not have the time to educate themselves on most of the issues that they are going to vote on. So if you can become a trusted source about the particular issue that you are coming to them about, you are honest about it. You tell them the good and the bad and the ugly. You tell them what the other side's position is. And you tell them why they should vote or not vote your way or support your position and why it's good for their constituents. You will have sway. Because they need somebody like that. This happened in Iowa all the time, at the local level and at the state level. There were lobbyists that every single legislator trusted. And if you gave them bad information, if that lobbyist burned that legislator, they were out. And not just with that legislator, but word spread quickly. So you have to be careful, and you can't lie. You never ever lie. Even if all the facts are against you, you can still make a compelling argument. And if you are trusted, you might still get that vote, but you never lie. We have issues. There are tons of issues to pick from. Not everything is going to be religion and government. And I don't use church and state because, very honestly, a lot of people don't understand the nuances of that. And they think it means we're just going after Christianity. I'm an equal opportunity hater. So any religion that wants to have influence on my life through government control, I'm against. I don't care what religion it is. But people also get confused by state. They don't understand that means government. They think that means their state. And they don't understand that also can mean local control. So that means everything from zoning boards and deciding if another church is going to get a whole block of land that's tax-free for decades, all the way up to deciding cases between the Supreme Court. So pick your issue. Lots of them to choose from. Who can help you? The first thing to decide is your issue local, state, federal? Is it a regulatory issue? Is it one that's going to be voted on? Is it something that's going to have to be taken to the courts? And you have to figure this out. So, first of all, it's a big question, like, for example, creationism in the classroom. Depending on what state you're in, it is either a local control issue or a state issue. So you have to decide if you're going to go to your local school board or if you're going to go to the state legislature. And now there are some national standards being put into place. So it can become something you go to the Department of Education about. So you have to figure that out. And usually you can do that by figuring out where the legislation is coming from, or by looking in the local newspaper, or just by doing some research on Google or Bing, whatever. The number one thing is to always have an angle and to be able to tell whoever you go to why it's in their best interest to see things your way. That's just basic salesmanship. How many of you have ever sold anything? How many of you were successful? You know that, right? Always have an angle. Why is it in their best interest to buy your product? It's the same thing with legislation. Just look at it as a massive sales job. Okay, so I'm going to break it down a little bit because a lot of people have never thought about going to, let's say, talk to Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, and now it's John Kerry. And chances are you never will get a meeting unless you are a big donor, okay? And most of us aren't. And for the one of you in the room who is, can we all go with you? But if you want to talk to the Secretary of State, because they are now going to have an Office of Faith-Based Initiatives, and they are going to be talking to people around the world about religious freedom, and you think that there needs to be something in there about protecting people from blasphemy laws, then you can call up or send an email to the Department of State and say, hey, I want to meet with someone, and chances are you are going to get a meeting with some sort of junior level regulatory person in there. Now the question is, are they somebody who's going to be there after John Kerry is gone and after the next 3 Secretaries of State are gone, or are they somebody who comes and goes with the administration? And the reason to ask that is because if they are a permanent fixture at the state, as long as they want to be, until they get fired or until they retire, then they don't have as much to lose or to gain from your visit because their political future does not rest on who's in the administration. So they are not influenced by the fact that you are part of a constituency. But if they are an administration official, then they are more likely to be swayed by the fact that you are part of a constituency if you can show that you have numbers, that you have influence, and that you are part of a bigger something. Does that make sense? And this works at the state level, and this works at the local level. So going back to the creationist example, and let's say your state, maybe Texas, is going to be doing textbooks, and you want to make sure there's no creationism, and Thomas Jefferson hasn't been somehow axed from history. So if you can go to the Department of Education, your chances are you're not going to get a meeting, and let's say it's not a committee, it's actually like one person who decides. You are not going to get a meeting with the department, the education secretary, or whoever they call it in that state. But you're probably going to get somebody just a few steps down. The more you can show that you reflect the ideals or the message of a bigger group of people, and the more that you can show that you are part of a citizenry or a collective group, the more influence you have. And that's why it's important that everybody speak up, everybody call in, everybody send an email, and you pick your person appropriately. And if that person is part of the governor's, he put that person in power, or once he put the Secretary of Education in, and that person is hired by that secretary and will lose their job if the governor loses that job, it's more important to show that you are somebody who votes, somebody who pays attention to the election, and is going to pay attention right up until the governor runs again or not. If it's somebody who's always going to be there, you're going to have less influence. So try to find out and pick your person accordingly. City council and board of education, school board are the same thing. Who here can name their mayor? I can't name my mayor. I tried looking for my mayor, and it doesn't even say on my stupid borough website. I couldn't find it. I hate Jersey, just so you know. I was so much cleaner in their websites. It's just very different. Seriously, East Coast is very different than the Midwest, and I've had a really hard time learning how things work. And so it's tough. It's not just easy as just going out and saying, okay, who's on my school board? It is tough. Do you know who's on your school board? If you don't have kids, how many of you are paying attention? But guess what? That's where your taxes go. You should be paying attention. You should be paying attention to how they're spending your money on schools and all the education stuff and teachers and things like that. And it's because more people aren't paying attention that sometimes shit slides by us, and then all of a sudden we read about what's being taught. So we should be paying attention because that's where most of the property taxes are going, right? So it makes it easier for officials to pay attention if you start being the squeaky wheel, because most of us aren't. We pay attention to the really big headline grabbers, but it's the small stuff that gets away. How many of you have ever attended a zoning board meeting? Okay, I am super impressed. Because guess what? That's where they decide how the land gets parceled out. And that's where they vote on whether churches get to have their property exempted. And so, that's also, people started really paying attention to this when Walmarts wanted to come into their towns. I don't know if you've ever seen any documentaries about Walmart not being voted out of towns, okay? What if we could do that about houses of worship? What if we could start a movement to start keeping houses of worship out, unless they agree to pay property taxes?
Yeah.
Just because they have the right under the law to not pay doesn't mean they have to agree to it, right? I mean, the building stands empty 85% of the time during the week. It does nothing for the community. Why? Why are we not going and doing that? I seriously want to see a movement to keep houses of worship out of our communities unless they are going to be contributing more than 15% of the time. And I don't know why you aren't all standing up applauding, because seriously, if we're that upset with Walmart, which at least is paying some taxes, I don't know why we're not more upset about houses of worship. Okay, so how many of you have ever met with an elected official at any level? Okay, so how many of you would not want to do it by yourselves? Fair enough. How many of you think it would be great to go like a gang and go and crowd into an office and be like, we are pissed off? Okay, all are going to get pepper sprayed. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about next is about how to get a meeting. And we're going to talk about the state legislature. And this is because mostly what we talked about, because of the New Jersey thing. And I'm hoping all of you will get involved with the Secular Coalition. I used to work for the Secular Coalition. I love the Secular Coalition. I think what they do is great. And the fact that they're bringing it to the states is super important. Much of what actually affects you is not federal legislation, it's state legislation. That affects you most on a day-to-day basis. New Jersey actually has a really great website for its legislature. And you can go and you can see what every single legislator has introduced as far as bills, how they voted, what has made it out of committee, what is going to be voted on. It's actually, if you spend about half an hour, a real good half an hour exploring the website, you get the hang of it, you will understand how the process works, and if you want a workshop on it, and can take a Red Bull or some other stimulant to keep you awake, I'd be happy to do a workshop on it. Because it's not quite as boring as a Windows workshop, but just to walk somebody through it, it is a little tedious. If you do it on your own, it's not so bad because you can go pop over to Candy Crush whenever you get bored. But it is important so that you can find bills, because when you just go for the first time and you're trying to find a bill you heard about for 2 seconds on the evening news, and then you try to go to the legislative website and find it, it will be frustrating and you may or may not be able to find it. Okay? But if you learn how to use it, and it is fairly user-friendly, you will be pleasantly surprised. And find out who's voted for it, who hasn't, how it made it out of committee, if they're going to have a public hearing. How many of you have ever been to a public hearing on a state issue? Okay, they have them a lot, and most of the time it's the people who are signed up on like Planned Parenthood or the LGBT movements list. They will send out an action alert and say they're having a public hearing, come sign up and come speak, and you get like 3 minutes. And I don't know if you saw anything about what happened in Texas this year with Wendy Davis when she tried to filibuster for 15 hours. And then when they had public hearings, they had people lined up down the staircase and out the door. And the Republican House shut off comment at like 3 o'clock in the morning, even though people hadn't had their say. It's really important that there be a showing that people care about an issue, and that you have something to say for 3 minutes. People can help you. There are people from the Secular Coalition, from American Atheists, from AHA, from every major national organization. If there is an issue that's important, you can throw up the flag and say, help us, and we will help you come up with 3 minutes to say. So put your name down on that list, go down to Trenton, and caravan with a bunch of people, get in line and say, I'm an atheist, I'm a humanist, this is why I'm against this. And it will get news. How many people have you ever heard in Trenton stand up and say, I'm an atheist and I'm for women's rights? Very few. But it would make news. It's a new angle. So let's start stirring up some controversy. Let's start making some noise, right? Okay. So if you're not going to do it in a public hearing, you can certainly do it in front of your personal legislator. Who knows who their actual legislator in Trenton for them is, in the House and the Senate? Okay. Your assignment is to go home and find out and put it on the NJHN website. Okay? Go home and look it up and know who it is. Because this is the person who's representing you. And if you don't know who they are, how are they supposed to know who you are? Right? How are they supposed to know they're representing atheists and humanists? How are they supposed to know what you care about if you don't know who they are and you aren't telling them? So we can't really hold them responsible if we're not talking to them. Right? So for every time you bitch and moan, and yes, I got to swear, and more is coming, it's not fair if we're not talking to them. They're not omnipotent. They're not omnipotent. They are not God. They don't know. And it is unfair to hold them to that high of a standard if we're not telling them. Now, once you tell them and you give them the opportunity and they don't come through, then you can curse them all you want. But it's not fair if we're not talking to them. So, all right, let's start about state legislature. How do you know when they're in session? Usually because the news is covering them, right? But know their cycle. Know when they're in session and when they're out of session. Because when they're out of session, they're at home and they're doing meetings. Like right now, because the Congress is not technically in session, they're back home trying to raise money and they're doing all these town halls. And those became famous because of the death panels and Obamacare and healthcare 3 years ago now. But they do those all the time. They're a great time, both at the state and federal level, to get in front in a public way in front of your legislator. Now, if you don't have it to do in a public way, you can do a private meeting. So you call them up, you call their offices. It's all public information. It's available on the state website. And in this day and age of social media, Facebook, Twitter, all that information is available. Every politician, every elected official has their own website. And so their office, their email is all available. Call and ask for an appointment. And don't lie, tell them exactly why you want to be with them. Just make sure you're actually a constituent, okay? Keep track, electronically, on paper, whatever. Keep track of when you called and who you talked to or if you left a message, so that if you don't get a response, call again and say, hi, this is Jane Doe, I am a constituent, I called 3 days ago, I'm trying to get an appointment. The fact that you haven't gotten a response is not good constituent services, and that will more likely get you a response. Just don't ever lie, okay? So be persistent, not annoying, don't ever get mad, because if you're mad, they'll think you're a loose cannon. Don't ever give them a reason to pepper spray you. Okay? All right. You can go as a group, okay? If Lisa wants to go, or Tim wants to go, and some of you have never gone before and you want the experience, Lisa can say, hey, we'll invite 3 other people to go with us. As long as Lisa is actually a constituent and she wants to bring 3 other people for the experience, that's fine. And let's say Jen wants to go, but she doesn't want to go by herself. She can invite Lisa and Tim as long as Jen is still the constituent, okay? And as long as you're honest and say, I'm coming on the constituent and I'm bringing 2 friends who want to come with me. And they're going to ask, are they constituents? No. Be honest. Don't lie, okay? And if Jen all of a sudden gets sick and can't go, Lisa and Tim can't go either. Always have at least 1 constituent at the meeting. Because if you're not a constituent, it doesn't matter what you say unless you're a professional lobbyist. So don't go to meeting. Just call and cancel and ask to reschedule. It's not a big deal. Happens all the time. Okay? Most meetings will be with a staffer, not your actual legislator. Now this can be different if you're meeting with, for example, a small town mayor, small town sheriff. Some sheriffs are elected and they'll meet with you if you have concerns. This can be different if you're meeting with a city council member of a certain town. They may not have staff. Same with school board members. When I was in Des Moines, I had meetings with my city council member all the time. She met us in a park, she would meet with us in her office. Mostly she would come out to wherever we were and meet with us there locally. And that worked really well, because then we could put flyers around the neighborhood and we got a bigger group. She was great, and she was kind of an anomaly. But most of the time you meet them in their office and you'll be talking to a staff member, usually like a governor's staffer. Most legislators in states don't have big staffs, so they will meet with you one-on-one. In Iowa, the way it works is when you show up in session, they're in their chambers and you're not allowed on the floor unless you're staff. So they have runners. And so you put a slip of paper in, you say, I'm here for my 11 o'clock meeting. You put your name down, you hand it to a runner, the runner takes it in, and then the legislator comes out and meets with you in the hall. So however it works, you figure it out. It's not scary. It may be interesting and slightly awkward, but you'll work it out. But whoever you meet with, you treat them with the same level of courtesy and respect. Because there's one thing that I've learned, whether it's Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, whoever, if you treat their staff with disrespect, they will not give you the time of day. Because most of these people treat their staffs with respect. There are a few exceptions, but most of the people really treasure their staff because they do a really good job for them, they're dedicated. So if they find out that and most of these people won't tattle, but if they find out that you've been disrespectful to their staff, you've lost any hope of having credibility. So treat everyone with the same courtesy and respect that you would the member or the member of Congress or the legislator you would. Even if you don't like the person, even if you were meeting with Rush Limbaugh, heaven help us, literally, if he ever got elected to office, and you couldn't stand that person, you would still rise above it and treat that person with respect and be courteous. You don't have to be overly gracious or anything, but you would still treat that person with respect. Preparation is key. Trying to think. How many of you have written an essay in the last 5 years? Very good. The rest of you, go hook up with a student from Rutgers. You need to be the expert. Most of the time, when you meet with someone about an issue that you care about, you are going to be the expert. Staff do not have the time. A quick statistic, when I was working in DC, we met with a person who worked with the Progressive Caucus, which is mostly Democrats, but they told us that only 25% of staff time is spent on preparation for bills. So 75% of staff time is spent on handling constituent phone calls, emails, mail, and all of their complaints and comments coming in. And 25% of staff time is spent on writing bills, vetting information, and preparing the member of Congress for what they're going to do on the floor of the House. So that means there is a whole lot of room left for someone to come in and be an expert on anything. In the Iowa House, for example, they don't have a full-time staff. They have a pool that they count on, and each person in that pool works on a specific committee, but not for the specific legislator. So that legislator is also only part-time. They have a full-time job, or they are doing something else when they're not in session. So they don't have time to become an expert on separation of religion and government issues. They do not have time to become an expert on the trappings of creationism versus evolution. And they may not understand the depth of the argument. So it's up to you to be the expert, not only on why your position is right, but also why the other position is wrong and what argument they're going to come after you. And a good staffer will ask you that in a meeting, and they'll say, well, what's the other side's position? And you should be able to answer and be honest and never ever mudsling, but be able to tell them why your position benefits the legislator or their boss better. For example, why would we teach evolution over creationism? Well, because evolution is a fundamental principle of science, and it teaches us other things, and we want our students to be able to achieve in fields like science and engineering and biochemistry and other things that are going to put America ahead when it comes to developing all kinds of new weapons, new sciences, new medicines, whatever. Come up with a really good answer. Because if you can go with an economic answer, it beats an emotional answer. So especially when you're talking on the state level, you're talking about creating jobs, and the brain drain that many states are facing, it's always a good one. Have you ever heard of Thomas? It's not called Thomas anymore, but you can still get to it. The Library of Congress has a fantastic website. I think that I just call it their website, the Library of Congress website. But what it is a amalgamation of everything that Congress does every session. It goes back years. So if you want to know what Menendez has been doing, you can look him up and see every bill that he has sponsored, every bill he's co-sponsored, every bill that he's voted on. And here's what's even more fun. You can look up the Congress, the 112th Congress, and you can see how many bills they've actually voted on and what they were. And so when they say, when Republicans come out and say, I'm all about jobs, 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 you can really say they're abortion, abortion, abortion. And you can see it. And you can also see how many bills have actually made it past both the Senate and the House, have been reconciled, and have made it to the President for signing. And that's really good information to know. Because when you go on and you watch television and you see the pundits talking, you can go and fact check it. And I tell you that not only because it's good so that you have information to people lobbying, but it's also really good in arguments with your dad. Or anyone. When you go to a meeting, you should have some sort of fact sheet. I call it a lobbying paper. That's how I was taught it. It's also called leave behind. You should have something, and in my book, there's an example of it. And it's a paper. And across the top, it should have who you are, or if you're lobbying with a group, the name of your group. It should also have what the issue is, and a couple of paragraphs describing your side of the issue factually. Okay? And then at the bottom in bold, it should have whatever action you're asking for. There's always an ask. You never go to a meeting just to talk. You always have an ask. So whether it's to veto a bill, whether it's to vote against a bill, whether it's to enact certain legislation, whether it's to sponsor a bill, whatever it is, you should have the ask there. You can have more than one ask. I always did. But whatever it is, and you leave it behind for them to remind you. Before you go, practice. Because you're going to be nervous. Everyone gets nervous before they speak. Professional performers talk about nerves before they get up for an audience. So practice. Again, in my book, I have an actual scenario that goes back and forth, and it's a positive one. In all of my years of lobbying, and all my years working at the legislature, when I interacted with all kinds of people, I only had a few negative experiences, but they will happen. My friend JT Everhart, I don't know if anybody of you know him or know of him, he writes a blog. What did JT do on patios or patios? He actually went and lobbied. Now, JT is what we call a firebrand. Diplomacy or lobbying is not usually what he would think of as his forte, but he wanted to try it. And he got in front of some Kansas U.S. legislators who their staffs were non-committal and extremely unwelcoming to the ideas that were put forth by members of his lobbying group. And JT was very frustrated by this. But he bit his tongue, and he got through it. But we had practiced that before he went, so he knew it would be frustrating. I had a driver's ed teacher once who said, always expect other drivers to piss you off, so when it actually happens, you're much less likely to be surprised by it. Don't be surprised if when you go in front of a staffer, they are resistant. You're introducing new ideas that they may personally find offensive or be upset by, but they will still do their job. I only had one meeting where I felt it went so poorly that I immediately called back when I got back to my office, asked to speak to the head of the legislative director, and asked for another meeting. Only once. And I still didn't diss the staffer. I just said I felt like that we did not connect very well. I find this legislation to be too important. Could I have a meeting with someone else, please? And I got it. And that actually was with a staffer of a member of Congress who votes on our side on almost every issue. But that personal staffer had a problem with atheism. So, and then I would go to, I don't know if you know Republican Steve King from the Iowa House.
Yes.
Okay, well, Steve King likes me. Steve King, I met him when he was still in the Iowa House. As a person, one-on-one, he could not be more charming and nice. And when I got to to DC, I called his office and I asked for a meeting. I wanted to see what I could do on the Republican side, even though there had been very little movement. And his office always gave me an appointment. And several times he went to committee hearings on issues that we cared about that he otherwise would not have. He didn't speak at those meetings. He didn't do any damage. But he went, and then he came up and acknowledged me afterwards and said, this is a woman whose ideas I don't necessarily agree with, but who I appreciate and like to talk to. And that was huge, okay? Yes, he's a horse's ass in a lot of ways. But to have that kind of respect from people from different perspectives and from who have completely different views is really important. It's why you never give up on somebody who seems to be completely on the other side, because you still want a dialogue. If you write off half of every legislature, half of the people in Congress, you're never going to get anything. And unfortunately, that happens a lot right now. We've got this divide, ideological divide. We can't afford that. Nobody really can. And so you have to work both sides. I would go to meetings sponsored by the Democrats, and they would have name tags. Well, I'm only one person. We didn't have someone to go to Republican meetings and Democratic meetings separately. But they would say what company they were from, okay? So then I'd go to the Republican meeting, and there'd be somebody different, but from the same company. Because they're not trying to play both sides in a sense of hurting, but they're trying to connect with both sides so that they get what they want. That's good lobbying, okay? And just because someone's better at it than us doesn't mean that that's evil. Some of them are evil, yes, but it doesn't mean that the actual act of doing it is evil. It's good politics, it's good policy. And if we're ignoring half of Congress, half of your legislature, if you're ignoring your governor because you don't like him personally, it's not a good policy. You have to reach out to everybody. And one of the ways to do that is to practice having a bad meeting. So, and I always say, as long as you come out without being pepper sprayed or handcuffs, it's a good meeting. It's really hard to mess lobbying up. It is. The point is to go in and to tell them who you are and what you stand for and why they should believe in what you're telling them. And as long as you walk out and you're not in handcuffs, you haven't been pepper sprayed, and they don't say never come back again, don't let the door hit you on the way out, it probably went fine. So you don't have to worry about, oh my God, I ruined the movement for everybody, or New Jersey's never going to recover, or the humanist movement is ruined. It's not going to happen. Dress professionally. I don't want anyone to not be who they are, but you want to give yourself the best chance that you have. And so I urge you to not wear open-toe shoes, not wear flip-flops, no jeans, no shorts, no t-shirts. Do not wear your atheist t-shirt. You know, I wear them all the time, but I never wore them just to meetings. Because you want to show that you take this seriously, that you're not a gimmick, you're not a flash in the pan. So you want to present yourself like you are taking this as seriously as they take their jobs. And let me tell you, whether it's a staffer or an elected official, they take it very seriously. Okay, so 8 basic things to remember. Be nice to the gatekeeper. I've walked into offices, and it's been the U.S. representative sitting behind the desk looking for something. And if I hadn't known who it was, you know, if I hadn't studied the picture or been introduced to the man before, it happened to be a man, you know, who knows? He was sitting down, he was looking for something. But you don't know who's sitting behind that desk. When I was waiting to go see, I was going to have a meeting with the mayor, it was his wife sitting behind the desk, waiting for him because the staff had gone home. You just never know who's sitting behind the desk. And it's just good policy to always be nice to the gatekeeper. They really do hold the keys to the kingdom, and it's just good. If you're going in a group, everyone gets to introduce themselves. We have some really strong personalities in this movement, and some people like to do all the talking, and that's fine. But it is a show of respect, and it is a moment for everyone that everyone gets to introduce themselves. Don't ever let one person introduce the entire group, because then the meeting will turn into a two-way conversation, and that's not the way it should be. It may end up being that way if you decide it, but everyone gets to introduce themselves. Always thank the official or the staffer for something. When I would meet with Steve King, I always thanked him for his bill on farm subsidies. I could give a shit about farm subsidies, but they helped Iowa farmers and it made the staffer feel good. We also had a a thing for all three of the Iowa football teams, Iowa, Iowa State, and UNI. And I always said go Cyclones, and the guy was a Hawkeye fan, so we would fight for a few minutes. It's a way to make a connection, you know. So make sure that you do something to thank them, and then also make a connection. I never lie, never ever lie, because they can catch you in a lie. But I've been to 47 of the 50 states, so I have a story about every state. When I met with Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, I told him about how I had just been rock climbing in his state, and he was thrilled. And so we chatted about that for a good 10 minutes. I got to hold his attention, and then he knew me every single time we met after that. So having that, also I used to pay attention to sports a lot more than I did now, because every man pays attention to how their sporting teams are doing in their state. Not even because they like sports, but because their constituents like sports. So it is a common language. For women, you pay attention to what's going on in celebrity news because they care about fashion. Now, not necessarily because they care about fashion, but because their constituents do, and they care about what's going on in Kim Kardashian's world. So there's lots of things to pay attention to. I would read lots of magazines, I would watch lots of TV shows just to be up on current events. So that I always have something to talk about. So when I would walk in the office, I could look around, immediately find something that I could talk to about and make a connection. If you're going from your own state, it shouldn't really be that big of a deal. Make sure that you ask the official's position on an issue. If it's a staffer, likely they're going to say, I can't speak for the mayor, the governor, the legislator, the senator, whatever, but you should still ask. And if you're actually meeting with the official, they're going to say, well, and you should gently push. Try to get an answer. Nothing wrong with that. Always make that ask that I talked about. Maintain your composure. Don't get mad. JT, when he went on those meetings, he bit his tongue. And he tweeted about it afterwards, and I'm never doing this again, ever. But he bit his tongue when the officials did not give nice answers, when they were not committal, when they were short, when he felt they were disrespectful. He refrained, and he allowed the rest of the group to speak, and they continued with their meetings, and it turned out to be a really positive experience for everybody. And that was really important, because he could have had them all kicked out if he let loose with how he wanted to go. So maintain your composure. Make sure to thank them for their time, and leave your leave behind. How many of you have business cards? Okay. If you're going to do lobbying on a regular basis, you should get your own lobbying business card. And you can put on it whatever you want. If you're going to put on an organization you belong to, you need to get their permission. Because when you go for a organization and you are representing them, you need to make sure that that's okay with them. So I wouldn't put an organization on your business card, but you put your name, whatever email or phone number, if you're okay with that. Just know that whatever you do, it's public record, okay? But it's good because you can pass those out. And you can put, I'm a citizen lobbyist, or I'm an atheist lobbyist, or whatever you want on there. But whatever you do, collect other people's business cards like they are candy, okay? You want everyone's business card that you meet with, and they'll be eager to hand them out. It's very difficult to get staff information, contact information from the outside sometimes, so get it while you're on the inside. Collect it. Everybody can have one, you know. Don't be chintzy, don't worry about them running out, don't worry about the trees. Grab as many business cards as you can. No kibitzing until you're out and done. This means no gossiping. When you leave the office, don't grab each other and squee and go, yay! Because you never know who's watching and who's listening. This is especially true if you're at a state capitol, if you're in an office building in DC. Wherever you're at, no kibitzing. Wait until you are in your car, wait till you're at dinner, and even then, you know, kind of keep it to yourselves. Many officials will meet with you, but they don't necessarily want everyone to know they met with you. There's lots of reasons for that. It could be that you're meeting about a piece of legislation that they don't want people to know how they're voting on. And right now, maybe not everyone wants to know if they're meeting with atheists. We want to change that, but you don't want to make enemies before you make friends. So it's very true that a lot of offices did not want people to know they were meeting with me. So I would not pull out my phone and immediately call my office and say, hey, we had a great meeting. And I would wear buttons or some pins from the different organizations that I represented when I worked for the Secular Coalition. I would take them off when I left the office. I wasn't ashamed, but if these were meetings that I needed to keep in confidence because we were meeting about specific legislation, then I did. Now, when I went with coalitions to meet with different, I didn't bother to take the pins off. I was like, who cares? And follow up with a thank you email, whoever you meet with. You should have the emails from business cards. Within 24 hours, you should be sending a thank you email. This reminds them of who you are. This reminds them that you did a leave behind. This reminds them about the issue. It's just good manners. Do not send a written thank you note, because with security the way it is now, it may take days for it to get to them. Then what are they going to do? They're going to throw it away. It's much more likely they'll type your email into an issue box, and it'll be there whenever they search for the issue then. So it's a more permanent reminder. Okay. I've gone on for about 40 minutes, and I don't want to bore you guys, so I can either continue on a little bit more, or we can open up to Q&A. Your vote. Continue? Continue? Okay. I don't want to bore you guys.
No chance.
Okay. All right, I'm going to take a quick Pepsi swallow. Hold on. Okay. So one of the problems that we had in Iowa was that I co-founded an organization called Iowa Atheists and Freethinkers. And I'm talking a lot about small groups again, because you guys are a state group, and you're doing the same kind of things that we did. And we had very resistant people who were not interested in our issues. And so how do you approach somebody who seems completely resistant to what you want? So for example, rather than running off and wanting to start a lawsuit every time something bad happens, how can maybe you work around that? Let's say your city council starts every meeting with a prayer, and you want to do a non-religious invocation. The way to start to introduce yourself to that is to first to send a note to whoever's in charge of city council. Sometimes it's the mayor, sometimes they have a senior member. New Jersey has lots of wicked ways of doing this. Send them a letter and ask. Just simply ask. And sometimes you'll get a yes, which is always surprising and awesome, and then you should publish the heck out of it and let every major national organization know, and send out a press release, and then go do it. If no, then you need to do some research and find out who's the most religious person on the organization, on the city council. That's just an example. What I did is, the guy was not my city council. My city council person was like, let the hippies come, let the Wiccans come, we don't care. So what I did is, I found the most religious guy, and I looked at how he voted and what he was interested in. And one common issue that he had with my group was that we liked the bike trails. And we had a massive flood in 2008 that had wiped out a lot of the bike trails along the river. And there was a bill coming up, or a vote, to authorize funding to restore those and then extend the bike trails to hook up with another set of bike trails just outside city limits. So I made an appointment, and I went to see him. And what I was doing was trying to meet him on neutral ground. I didn't lie to him. I went to him on an issue we were both interested in. I didn't lie about who I was, not my name. And so I went in, and we had a great discussion about it. And at the end of the meeting, when we stood up to shake hands, I said, "Thank you so much, Councilman." I said, "This is fantastic." I said, "I can't wait to go back and tell my group, Iowa Atheists and Freethinkers, that we have your support on this issue, and that we're going to be able to enjoy these bike trails for years to come." His eyes. And he didn't say anything. And I left. But what it did was give him an introduction to atheism in a really non-confrontational way. Here was somebody who sat down, agreed with him on a bunch of stuff. We had a really nice discussion about a mutually agreeable proposition that would benefit the city, and he had our support, and I was an atheist. I have no idea what the conversation was like at dinner that night, but I really wanted to be there. The reason I did that was to try to introduce atheism to him in a non-confrontational way, because sometimes diplomacy, I think, works better than firebrand. Sometimes firebrands are needed, and that's totally fine. But you have the home field advantage. One of the things about working in a local area, and I want you guys to remember this as you go through, is that these are your neighbors and your friends, and you are going to have to, unless you decide to move, you're going to have to stay with them. And some of them are going to know you, and you have to introduce yourself in a way that makes them realize you're not the boogie person, right? that you're not evil, that you're not out to trash everything they believe in, that you are a member of the community looking for equal opportunity and access. So look for a creative way to do that. And for me, this was the way to do that. Then I got a job to be a lobbyist for an atheist organization and I left. But they're still working on it. It's not a short-term process. Lobbying is about building relationships. It's about building trust and about providing information and education. And so, as tempting as it is to go in like a bull sometimes and break down the barriers as quickly as you can, sometimes a more subtler approach is needed, is more desirable, but it does take more finesse and more time. And the results are not nearly as visible. But I think that they offer you an opportunity to build something more lasting in your community as well. You can go and sue, I know probably win, but what kind of scars will you create in your community? And I think each group has to decide for themselves, each person has to decide for themselves what is better for their community. And sometimes it is breaking through those walls and going and being the bull, because you have to. You've tried everything. But I urge you to look for the more subtle ways too. Okay, so elections. We do have elections coming up. Couple, thanks to our interesting governor. How many of you have ever volunteered on an election? Very good. How many of you liked it? All right, if you didn't, you were doing something wrong. Elections are a hoot. Working for a campaign should be fun, even if you lose, because you don't know that until the very end. They are a great way to network and to introduce yourself to a community. You get in there and you can tell everyone you're an atheist. Who cares? They're not going to turn you away. You're a volunteer. You're free labor. And it's a great way to network and to meet people. Because especially if you get in early, or even if you come in late and you get introduced to people, the people who are actually paid for the campaign work, if the person wins, they're going to end up working for the candidate. And they're going to remember who the volunteers were. They don't forget you. And so you will have an in with that candidate then. When they have a position, you can say, hey, remember me, I volunteered for the campaign? All those late nights, that night we shared anchovy pizza because they gave us the wrong order. And you have an in, and they are more likely to give you a meeting. And they're going to remember how much time and effort you put into the campaign. So when your issue comes up, they're going to listen to you. So it's a way to get in. It's also a way to learn more about the political process. It's also, if they lose, those people who worked for the campaign aren't going away. They will work for other campaigns. They will sometimes go on to run for office themselves. So it's never a bad thing, and it's fun. If you've never worked on a campaign and been up till 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out a problem and then realizing that you had the solution 2 hours ago and completely missed it, and then cried, and then laughed, and then went and got more pizza, you haven't lived. So you should do a campaign, whether it's a small one, a city, local, up to a national. I highly encourage it, especially coming into 2014 with the House elections. I really encourage you to get involved. Again, how do they know that they have atheist constituents if you're not visible? And this is a great way to be visible and to tell other people in your community, yeah, I'm here to support our candidate. Yeah, I'm an atheist. So what? You know what? It's cool. They're not going to turn you away. Every job that for a campaign is a shit job. So you're no worse by telling them off than you were before. Again, stand up at public events, tell them. I came out to the president on national television. I haven't been hit by a hit squad, or I haven't been audited. I'm not on the no-fly list. I didn't get disinvited from any events. So, if you can come out to the president, you can come out to anybody. Becoming a fundraiser. How many of you have ever given money to a political candidate? If you feel comfortable, just raise your hand. Okay, that's actually really, really high for a small group like this. How many of you, it was the Obama administration, that was the first time. They broke record ground on this because most of the time local candidates in a state get almost no money. So you can make a huge difference by being a small contributor in a local race. voice because they don't get money. Money goes to big national campaigns. Most people give to the national elections. They don't give the local. It's really hard to get money. So let's say, I'm going to use Lisa and Tim as an example. They want to raise money for somebody. And they call the campaign, say we're going to do this, or they call the local office, make sure that they're not violating any campaign laws because every state has certain laws that are different. And they invite not New Jersey Humanists, because New Jersey Humanists is a 501c3, but they put on Facebook on their personal page, say, hey guys, anybody who wants to support this candidate, we're going to provide the meat and the veggie options, the vegan options. Everyone bring a salad, and you're going to pay $20 to eat at our house tonight and play in our pool. And 100 people show up. Okay? So then everyone paid a picnic fee. They take that picnic fee on Monday and turn it into the campaign. Suddenly, Lisa and Tim and their friends, big donors in a local election, and you have a bigger voice. And then they become your representatives on your issue, and it will have a big effect. Now, if they sent that money into the Obama campaign or into Hillary's campaign or whoever's running or Ron Paul, it wouldn't have such a big influence. It would still matter. You would still get phone calls and more emails than you wanted. But on a local or state campaign, you would be big fish in a small pond. It makes a big deal, especially if they can say that they did it as part of a group effort and not just as individuals. So those dollars really matter. And I encourage you to really pay attention again to that state politics. Volunteer to get out the vote. You can't ask people who are going to vote for it, shouldn't matter, but if you can get election day off, or if you can, for early voting, if you can help drive people, senior citizens, elderly people, help students get to the polls, help them vote, that's just good. And both campaigns, both parties, run huge operations to help get out the vote. And those matter. So if you can participate in that on election day or before for early voting, that's awesome. Okay, that's all I have. If there are any questions, we'll turn off the camera and turn on lights, and I'd be happy to answer them. I just really encourage you to get involved. The process is what we have, but the only way to change it is from the inside out. And it's not fair to get angry at it if you're not involved in it. Once you get involved with it, you can say fuck off to anybody you want, but not until you actually try. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.